Sorry I haven't come out with a video this week. I've been busy working on important things. I'm the Messianic Torah dude, and this week's Torah portion is Shemot. Shemot, names, comes from Exodus chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 6, verse 1. When we last left the Israelites, they were living in Egypt, and things were going pretty good. Joseph was a high-ranking official, and everybody was well-respected. As Shemot begins, we get a new Pharaoh. This is several generations later, and the Pharaoh's forgotten about all of the things that Joseph has done. All of the things he's done as far as delivering people from famine, taking care of everybody, expanding the Pharaoh's power, all of that has been forgotten. So they look at the area of Goshen and they say, wow, there are a lot of these Israelites. If they decide to rise up against us, we're not going to stand a chance. And if we get invaded and they decide to side with the invaders, we're not going to stand a chance. So what they do is they start a cycle of oppression. But what happens is, instead of the oppression diminishing their numbers and really breaking their spirits, they pull in closer together and they become stronger and they become even more numerous. So the Pharaoh comes up with a plan in Exodus chapter 1, verses 15 through 20. Then the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, when you serve as a midwife to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall kill him. But if it is a daughter, she shall live. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded, but let the male children live. So the king of Egypt called the midwives to them. Why have you done this and let the male children live? The midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them. So God dealt with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very strong. A common misconception about this passage is people mistakenly thinking that Shiphrah and Puah lied to the Pharaoh, told him something that wasn't true. When my suspicion, and this is a DeLorean question, because the only way to really answer it is with a time-traveling DeLorean, or a little blue box. But I don't think Shiphrah and Puah lied to the Pharaoh. You notice it says the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. Before the midwife has arrived, they have already given birth. What I think happened, is that Shiphrah and Puah took their time when coming to help deliver the Hebrew children. I think they said, you know what, people have been having babies for, back then it was, still thousands of years, but people have been having babies for a long time. We can sit this one out. I think they basically would, just show up whenever they felt like it, and if they were late, they didn't care. Kind of like the cable company. So when this doesn't work, Pharaoh falls back on plan B, which plan B is the Herod plan. The Herod plan being kill all the male babies. He orders them to all be thrown in the Nile River. One baby that survives this is Moses. Moses' mother puts him in a basket made of reeds, and they sail him down the Nile River, and he's eventually picked up by the Pharaoh's daughter. So he's raised in the Pharaoh's house. When Moses is grown, he sees an Egyptian slave master beating one of the Hebrew slaves. He intervenes and goes all dirty Harry on him, kills him, and hides his body in the desert. Then the next day, he sees two Hebrews fighting, and he tells them to stop. And they say, what, are you going to kill us like you did that Egyptian? So Moses goes on the run. He's on the run from the law until his wanted level goes down. He goes out into the wilderness where he meets and marries Zipporah, the daughter of the priest of Midian. Then in Exodus chapter 3, verse 1, we get Moses' encounter with the burning bush. Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness, and he came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called out of the bush, Moses, Moses, he said, Here I am. Then he said, Do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face and was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their suffering, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land into a good land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. So the Lord is promising to deliver the people of Israel, and he's picked Moses as the person to bring that message. So after they go over some more details, we get this passage in chapter 4, verse 1. Then Moses answered, But behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say the Lord did not appear to you. So a major part of this week's portion is Moses making excuses, finding reasons for the Lord not to send him, trying to talk the Lord out of it. And we don't know if these are legitimately the reasons he didn't want to go, or if he didn't want to go for another reason, and this was just whatever he could come up with to explain it away. Maybe the real reason he didn't want to go back was because he knew he was still wanted for murder. I really wanted to talk this week about excuses, about us making excuses, because one of the things that we know as believers in Yeshua is that we have a call on our lives. Every single person has a call on their life. Now in Ezekiel chapter 33, verses 7 through 9, it says this, So you, son of man, I have made a watchman for the house of Israel. Wherever you hear a word from my mouth, you shall give them warning from me. If I say to the wicked man, O wicked one, you shall surely die, and you do not speak to warn the wicked man to turn from his way, that wicked person shall die in his iniquity, but his blood I will require at your hand. But if you warn the wicked to turn from his way, and he does not turn from his way, that person shall die in his iniquity, but you will have delivered his soul. The whole point of that passage is it shows us that when the Lord places a calling on our life, we're responsible for fulfilling that call. It's our fault when people don't hear the message that the Lord has given us to speak. And if they don't believe us, as Yeshua said, when you go into a town and they don't believe you, knock the dust off your feet. It's not your responsibility to make them believe. It is your responsibility to spread the gospel. And in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 2, it says, Preach the word, be ready in season, out of season. Reprove, rebuke, and exhort with complete patience and teaching. We're reminded that even when we think it's not the time for us to be doing teaching, we should still be ready to be doing teaching. We should still be ready to spread the gospel. So Moses' next excuse is to doubt himself. He says in chapter 4, verse 10, But Moses said to the Lord, O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and tongue. Now this is another DeLorean question, but we don't know exactly what Moses means when he says he's slow of speech and tongue. Does he mean he's one of those guys who, an hour after the argument's over, thinks of the perfect zinger? Is he somebody with a speech impediment that talks like Elmer Fudd? We don't know. On the other hand, we don't know if this is just something he perceived about himself. Sometimes we think we are more limited than we actually are. But regardless, in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10, it says, For we are his workmanship, created in Messiah Yeshua for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. The Lord has prepared certain things that you are suited to do, that you are called to do. So we've already seen how disobeying your calling makes you responsible for the people that you were called to. But now we see that the Lord has set things up for you. The Lord has prepared these works in advance. And then we get to the final excuse in chapter 4, verse 13, when he simply says, "Oh Lord, please send someone else, not me. Don't make me go." And sometimes when we have excuses for why we're not following the calling that the Lord has set before us, that's what it all boils down to. Lord, why me? Why can't you send someone else? Why can't you send somebody who they will listen to? Why can't you send somebody who is a better speaker? Why can't you send somebody with a PhD or a THD in ancient languages? Why can't you send somebody who's got the Bible memorized front and back? Why can't you send somebody more handsome? Why can't you send somebody funnier? Why can't you send somebody smarter? The Lord has set good works for you, and you are the perfect person to do those works. Trust in the Lord and be obedient to the calling He's given you. So what are some things that the Lord has called you to do? And did you obey, or are you still hesitating? Let me know in the comments. If I gave you a laugh, give me a like. And if you learned something, give me a share. I'm the Messianic Torah dude. Shalom, and stay in the Word.